Good morning, Garo. It's so nice to see you on this gloomy, windy morning in London. You have brightened up my morning. Thank you very much for coming. And would you like to say a couple of words about yourself, please?
Sure. Like many Armenians, we have been displaced. I was born in Istanbul. In Armenian, we call it Bolis, and came to the U.S. at the age of 17. And of course, because of my roots and my grandmother's teachings, I always felt like we needed to do something for our people. In fact, one of the reasons I left Bolis was because I was getting active in our school, which was an Armenian school, and starting to talk about why it was so important for Armenians to have their own country. And this is back in 1960s. And when this came to the attention of our vice principal, who was Turkish, my father made a decision that I should leave Turkey, otherwise I'd get into trouble with the authorities. So I did. And unfortunately, I never went back and lived in the US. And in 2001, for the first time, I had the means to go to Hayastan. And when I say I had the means, I'm talking about the luxury of time and the clarity of my head in order to be able to see what our people in Hayastan lived like. And so I was quite shocked in 2001 because we were coming out of the difficulties of the post-Soviet Armenia. And of course, the plight of our people, particularly in our villages, was heartbreaking to see. Heartbreaking to see the children in the conditions that they went to school and lack of facilities and resources for them to really develop and learn. And it became almost obligatory to do something about it. So the next time I went back to Hayastan with my wife was 2 years later. And in fact, my decision to go back was based on a high sense of responsibility, because during that time, during those 2 years between 2001 and 2003, I was very busy running 2 companies, and so I could always rationalize that I was too busy. And then all of a sudden in 2003, I realized that my people don't have the luxury of time for my busy schedule to be cleared. And so that drove me to my second visit. And there was a catalyst during my second visit when I was visiting the village of Karakert at the suggestion of a wonderful priest who died a few years back, Father Dajjad from Boston. He said, "You must go and see Karakert." So I did. And then an elderly man in the village, Baron Davtyan, took me around to see the conditions of the children. And so I said to him, this was in August of 2003, I said, "I will come back and see what I can do to help you." And he laughed at me. He said, "Everybody says that and nobody ever comes back." And that was the birth of COAF, because after that date, I went to Hayastan at least 4 times a year. And
Can you clarify what does COAF stand for?
COAF is the Children of Armenia Fund, and we decided to name it as such because as we all say, children are our future. I mean, children of Armenia represent the future of Armenia. And so we named the organization Children of Armenia Fund to be basically conveying that message that children of Armenia are the future of Armenia. And of course, it's nice to have that in concept, but how do you practice it? And so when we started with COAF, activities, we were a tiny little existence in Armenia. I had one person sort of coordinating the efforts, and now we have grown to 200 plus people. It's a holistically positioned concept and an implementation of the organization in ways that cover all walks of life. We concentrate on the villages of Armenia because that's where the most need is. Villages of Armenia have been neglected for a long time with no resources, but we've discovered that with a little bit of resources provided to them, the potential, the output from our young generation is unbelievable. If you give them a sense of what is possible and provide educational, health, social, and economic resources to them, the investment in them and return on investment that we have seen over the last 21 years has been fantastic. Fantastic, because these children are achieving heights that you couldn't even imagine were possible. And what are those heights? Well, I have one child from the village of Lernagok, just as an example, who I had given a little talk to her class when she was 13 years old. And the talk was about the immune system, which is my field. Immunology and cancer are my preoccupation with my everyday job. So I had given a talk in Armenian that taught them the importance of the immune system. And the next time I met this child was at the medical university in Yerevan. She came to me, I was visiting the university, I had given a talk. She came to me and she said, "Do you remember me?" And of course she was 13 years old, now she was in her 20s. I said, "I don't remember you, but I'm happy to get to know you." She said, "I was one of those children that you were talking about immunology, and now I'm graduating from medical school in Yerevan." Now this young lady went from being trained in Yerevan to an internship program in France. And then I brought her to be trained with my company, and she's now back in at the Yeloyan Center practicing medicine. She married a wonderful young man who is a transplant surgeon at the Yeloyan Center. And I have seen her development, and she still works for my company, Agenis, from Yerevan, because we have clinical activities there. And she is one of the superstars in my company.
We know how COAF is flourishing due to your philanthropic work and your dedication. But besides being a philanthropist, you are also a scientist, businessman, farmer, grandfather. Are you a grandfather? No, you're
I'm not a grandfather yet. I
father,
hope to be soon.
family man. So you are doing so many things. Please tell us the secret. Where do you find the time to dedicate yourself to science and business?
You know, this is of course, a very, very prolific question. And the way to address it is, I have an addiction. And the addiction is when I see a need that I have the capacity to address, I feel compelled to do it. For example, my mother died at the age of 47 of breast cancer. I was a young man. She died literally in my arms. I had brought her to the US in 1972. I arrived in the US in 1970, and I stayed with a wonderful family in Brooklyn, Armenian family, who homed me very kindly while I was going to school, college. And my mother, at that time in 1972, She had already been diagnosed with cancer and been operated on. There weren't very many drugs to treat her, and so I brought her to the US for some experimental treatment. Unfortunately, she died in my arms after 3 months, and it was heartbreaking to see how humiliating a disease cancer is. So many years later, when I came across a technology that I thought was fundamentally able to treat cancer and cure cancer, and this technology was an immune technology. It happened to be at the time a personalized cancer vaccine. I felt the need to do something about it, and with all of the challenges, I formed the company, my company, Agenus. And 30 years later, we have a very powerful booster of the immune system. In fact, combinations of antibodies that can boost the immune system. And the results that we have achieved are incredible. They're miracles. In fact, at the Atom Conference, I showed a visual of the results of what these antibodies do to clear cancer in a period of 7 weeks from a massive tumor to tumor entirely gone. So getting back to your question, Nouneh, when I saw the need in the Armenian villages, I felt the need to do something about it. And of course, at that time, just as with my company, when I started the company, I had no idea how the challenges would develop over the years and how vast an effort this would represent. And the same thing with Co-op. When we started with one village, and then we were approached by the next village, and they said to us, "Mer mechke," meaning, what is our sin that you haven't come to our village yet? So that became from one village to the next village, and now we've got 150 villages in which we work with. And of course, the children are the focus. And when you see the results, just like you see with my company, it's taken a long time, but when you see the outcomes, just as we're seeing with Co-op, the outcomes of our children growing and achieving fantastic achievements, you feel compelled to do more of it. That's why I say it's an addiction. Addiction because when you see a need, you need to address it. And when you address it and you see the outcomes, you feel like you need to address more of it. And with my farm, for example, it's all about healthy living, wellness. And in modern society today, we are in crowded places. London is a wonderful place, and I'm delighted to be here. But we're talking about processed foods and how does that affect our bodies. So I felt compelled to start a farm more than 10 years ago. It's called Ararat Farms, of course, to be symbolic with our people and our history. And Ararat Farms grows healthy foods for healthy existence. And so these experiments have yielded outcomes that are really addressing wellness, whether it is through Agenus, addressing wellness for cancer patients, through Co-op that addresses wellness and development and achievement for our children, and Ararat Farms that achieves wellness through providing healthy foods through processes that are natural. It's all sort of are connected.
You are becoming more and more well-known, you and your company, in treating cancer cells. What is that is different in your treatment from all other cancer treatments? What is that you do?
So our cancer treatments really address the immune system. Immune system is the natural defenses and offenses of the body. It is what keeps us alive and what keeps us protected from anything that comes from outside that may harm our body. But in the case of cancer, cancer is an evil that grows from within. Generally, microbes come from outside, and the immune system battles them. But when something grows from within, it has a tendency to fool the immune system. So to battle the evil from within, cancer, becomes more challenging. And that challenge is best addressed by very, very specifically methods that are able to overcome that cancer's fooling the body by appearing like it's one of its own, because cancer cells are mutations of normal cells. And the immune system, recognizing a normal cell, doesn't generally activate itself to battle that cancerous normal cell or cancerous cell that is born from a normal cell. So addressing that and activating the immune system becomes more of a challenge. And my company, over the years, we've been doing this for 30 years, and cancer immunology has become fashionable among other companies only in the last 10 years. But our 30 years of knowledge and culture and science has been able to specifically address some of the more obvious handicaps of the immune system. And so what we do is really activates the immune system. Activate the immune system to recognize the specific cancer of that person and battle it. And of course, this is best done slightly in the earlier stages of disease, and it becomes a greater challenge in the later stages of disease. What I mean by that is, in very end-stage disease, we seem to be helping about 20 to 30% of the patients with our methodology, immune mediation. Whereas if you look at stage 3 disease, we're able to help 80–90% of the patients. And so the hope is that we will be able to eradicate cancer via the immune system, immune activation. And the results so far have been very encouraging, very encouraging. We've treated over 1,000 patients, and in what we call in the neoadjuvant setting, which is stage 3, late stage 3 disease, we're achieving complete remissions of tumors in a matter of 6 to 8 weeks, which is nothing short of a miracle, as opposed to drugs like chemotherapy, radiotherapy, that weaken the cancer and in some patients allow the immune system to take over. But we're taking that extra step of helping the immune system so it overcomes the cancer more frequently.
You are concentrating your work in the United States. How do you work with other countries?
So, drug development has unfortunately become such a bureaucratic process. And even though regulatory agencies take comfort in the fact that they have all of these procedures that are designed to protect patients, but over-regulation, which is what we're experiencing right now, ends up hurting patients by delaying the development of advanced technologies and delaying the availability to patients. And so, but thanks to the network of hospitals throughout the world and the communication between key opinion leaders, we've done a fantastic job of doing clinical trials in over 80 different hospitals throughout Europe, throughout the US, and even in Russia. I mean, I know that there are political tensions right now, but those tensions are not really justification for punishing patients in places like Russia, because, you know, patients in Russia are just as needy as patients in Europe, US, South America, and Asia. So we work throughout these regions, and we have a network of hospitals and key opinion leaders that we work with that have been very supportive of our drugs because they see the results. When they see the results for their patients, they want more of it. So that's how we have treated over 1,000 patients throughout these regions, not just in North America. And our expectation is that we will make our drugs, as we are beginning to do that now in a number of countries, even before formal approval. There are named patient programs that allow our drugs to get to patients prior to approval. And of course, the objective is to get approval as soon as possible, overcome the bureaucratic hurdles of the regulatory systems to do this, because patients are waiting and they cannot afford to wait long.
Are you optimistic on means of battling cancer in the future altogether?
I think I have been more optimistic today than ever before, because when you see results in the clinic of patients undergoing complete remissions, or patients with advanced cancers living much longer than one would expect them to live, it's not only hope, it's reality today. And that reality will translate to widespread application of our molecules, antibodies, and technologies. And of course, the advancement is knowledge that continues to develop, and that's what we're seeing today. I mean, collectively, between our medical scientists, our laboratory scientists, and clinicians around the world that want to really do something fundamentally different about curing cancer than we have in the last 50 years. I mean, even though we have made progress, but that progress has been so incremental that cancer today not only remains a major problem, but in, you know, cancers like colon cancer, we are seeing an epidemic of colon cancer in the young, in children as young as 8 years old, that we have seen develop metastatic colon cancer. And that requires immediate attention, a high sense of urgency to address it. And I am convinced that the immune system is the only way you're going to be able to address this incrementally and in a major leap of cures. Whereas prior treatments like chemotherapy and targeted treatment and radiation have really done a little bit for them. For example, we've approved drugs that provide only 4, 5, 6 weeks of extension to life, but at a huge cost to patients, because during those 4, 5, 6 weeks of extension to life, quality of life is horrible for these patients. It's almost inhumane to treat these patients with drugs that regulatory agencies and companies claim as major advancements because they have met the statistical hurdle. But that statistical hurdle is meaningless. So with immunotherapy and immune cures, we are changing that fundamentally with major leaps that we haven't seen before. And that's very encouraging.
That all sounds perfect. But please tell me, listening to you, cancer comes out of blue at any age of human life, which sounds terrible. Are there any precautions to be taken not to have cancer?
Of course, prevention methodologies for cancer and other diseases are the best. They're not 100% guarantee in an individual, but there's no question that these precautionary, preventive methods make it much less probable that you may develop cancer. Of course, there are genetic factors and others, but having wellness, a life that is concentrating on wellness, a healthy lifestyle, which was one of the major topics of ATOM this week. Practically every session addressed the importance of wellness and the methodologies of achieving that wellness. And that is critical for us. What does that mean? It means healthy nutrition. It means having a lifestyle to keep our bodies in healthy condition, an exercise regimen. It means mental healthness that allows us to practice wellness through meditation, for example, methods that reduce stress. Stress is a major evil. And so if we combine all of this, healthy nutrition, mental health, and physical conditioning, your probabilities of developing cancer will be reduced. And not only that, but your probabilities of being able to combat exogenously introduced diseases, such as microbes, such as viruses, will be much more enhanced through our healthy immune system being able to combat these things successfully. For example, during COVID, it became obvious that if one was not healthy, meaning overweight and contracted COVID, their ability to have a positive outcome in ridding themselves of this virus was less than healthy people. Of course, these are not black and white distinctions, but we're talking about probabilities of being able to remain healthy even with adverse conditions such as infections and cancer. Probabilities are much better with better mental health, better nutrition, better conditioning of the body.
You mentioned ATOM conference, and we were honored to have you at the second ATOM conference as a cancer specialist, and you taught so much to the listeners, to the audience, having such an experience. What is your opinion and what is your view on the future of ATOM partnership, ATOM conference?
I think, Nouneh, you mentioned that Singapore was the first ATOM conference, yes, and that was only in 2023. And so, unfortunately, I did not attend the Singapore conference. I blame myself for not doing it, but I'm delighted that I attended this one. And unlike many conferences that are very specific subject-oriented, the ATOM conference's broad, holistic approach to a number of different subjects, ranging from, for example, how do we make sure that we have a healthy microbiome? Healthy microbiome drives so many other components of the body, including neurological health, mental health, immune health. Having these diverse subjects being visited by some of the world's top people in the fields, in their respective fields, I think encourages us. Of course, specialization is important in some ways, but a holistic approach, a more broad understanding of how the body works. And the body is a very complicated system. Science has mastered very specifics at a micro level, at a level of specialization that allows us to shed scientific light into even nanosystems. But we have yet to master biological systems that are multifaceted, multi-component, and having an approach like Atom, looking at the broader picture with a level of scientific rigor, I think is going to be critical in our advancement in understanding the body. And of course, the body is a very critical component of what makes life happen and what allows us to be players in the global system as both individuals and as parts of a social network. And so we have to start from our own bodies, and Atom's introduction of a holistic approach with scientific rigor, I think is something that would like to be visiting over and over again, and I understand that this will happen with some frequency now, with the next Atom conference being in Los Angeles in May. I think that I'd welcome advancements in human interactions towards a holistic approach to wellness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.